So I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Julia. I use she, her pronouns, and I live on Wabanaki land. A quick visual description is that I'm a Palestinian American white woman with short brown hair, pink bangs, a keffiyeh headband, and clear glasses. My background is the Palestinian flag with the Centering Palestine logo on it. We've got the packet link in the chat. I do recommend opening that up. So if you open up the packet, you can follow along. This event is organized by many volunteers, including Palestinian, Jewish, and allied contributors. I'm going to briefly go over our community agreements. You are welcome to look at the longer version. During the news section, which I'll do in a sec, we put a content warning in place, and we do pause Zoom admittance just for that news segment while there's a content warning. If you ever get stuck in the waiting room, if you come late and are stuck in there for a few minutes, don't worry, we will get to you. It's probably just because the news segment is happening. So let's go over the condensed version of our community agreements. So we're a COVID cautious event organized by COVID cautious folks, and we ask that attendees be respectful of that intersection. So what that means is that at these sessions, it's not appropriate to discuss organizing or protesting in ways that don't take COVID precautions or other important accessibility measures. We are, of course, a pro-Palestine space and support the liberation of Palestine. We are anti-Zionist, and we do not tolerate anti-Semitism or Islamophobia of any kind. We are anti-Zionist, and anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Zionism is a settler colonial nationalist movement, and geopolitical powers like the US and Israeli governments have tried to make Zionism and Jewishness synonymous. This is inaccurate and only serves to further harm Jewish and Palestinian communities. We center marginalized voices, particularly of Palestinians right now. As organizers, we do our best to include content warnings. In terms of chat etiquette, everyone does an amazing job. Feel free to use the chat to ask questions. We just ask that our comments and discussions stay focused on the task at hand. So with that, I'm going to put my content warning in place. If you would like to not hear this part, you can turn your volume down, and we'll tell you in the chat when we're done. The other thing I like to note is that in general, our sessions are not geared toward kids, but especially the news section. So if you have kids in earshot, I would put headphones on. All right, with that, let's get into our news for this past week. Today is day 207. And since October, at least 35,000 Palestinians have been killed, and the number is likely much, much higher. News, or not much news, on a truce deal. In Egypt, Israel, Qatar, and Hamas are working together to broker a truce that could at least halt the ongoing genocide and offensive in Gaza. While world leaders urge Hamas to take this so-called generous deal, an agreement needs to tangibly improve the situation for Gazans rather than just postponing genocide and invasion. So we need to really keep pushing our officials for an immediate permanent ceasefire rather than some kind of wishy-washy in between that really only pushes out the genocide, right? Our next topic is another big headline that we don't have a lot of concrete info on, but Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu is reportedly concerned that the ICC, that's the International Criminal Court, will issue an arrest warrant for committing crimes in the Gaza Strip. There are reports that the US has been working to stop this, and analysts are frustrated that Biden is yet again stepping up to protect Netanyahu rather than the people who are starving in Gaza. So we'll have to keep an eye out to see what actually comes of this. In a different court, in the ICJ, Nicaragua's request for the ICJ to order Germany to halt military aid to Israel was rejected on the grounds that the legal conditions for such an order were not met. While this is disappointing, the ICJ will continue to hear the case that says Germany failed to prevent genocide in Gaza. However, this is something that could take months or years to be resolved. So bad news, they are not going to order Germany to halt military aid. Kind of good news, at least they're hearing the case. They didn't throw it out completely. For some US updates and some encouraging ones, Hawaii senators adopted a resolution calling for a permanent ceasefire, becoming the first state, I believe, to do so. Pro-Palestine candidate Summer Lee defeated the AIPAC and pro-Israel lobby in Pennsylvania, an important victory in this year's election cycle. And with only 10 states left to go, there have been over 1.2 million votes cast in the uncommitted campaign across the US. So that's really, really exciting to see that momentum. Of course, there are a lot of college protests going on right now. That is what we were focusing on in our education in action, so I'm not going to go into detail right now, but we will get to that. Next is topic 6. So we talked about this last week. You've maybe seen it on social media. The Freedom Flotilla that was posed to set sail and break the siege of Gaza has been delayed again. This basically happened because there were some really unusual inspection and information regulations that were enacted that ultimately removed flags from 2 of the ships, including the one that had most of the aid. So they effectively halted the journey because of weird paperwork kind of rules, but purposefully so. However, despite this setback, the group remains determined to continue their work to break the siege, and many human rights and legal organizations maintain that this flotilla has every right to continue this effort. Moving on to some more topics for Sudan. It has now passed a year of war in Sudan, and there are 24 million people that require immediate assistance, and it is now the largest hunger crisis in the world. You can check out the links that we've got in the post there, but there's a great summary that includes key facts, organizing tips, actions, and more. I really encourage you to catch up on that. They've compiled that in a really nice post for us. Next, as violence continues against the folks of the DRC, I've listed 2 resources. The first is a video about why people aren't paying attention to this conflict. That's a really important part of this conversation. And the second is more zeroed in on how Apple continues to illegally obtain minerals from the embattled eastern region of the DRC, and many lawyers have accused Apple of human rights violations. Apple is denying this. However, there is real evidence here, and not just evidence, there's reports that this is happening. So definitely catch up on that. And needless to say, avoid buying Apple products for so many reasons, if at all possible. But I really encourage you to catch up on those resources. The last thing I wanted to mention before we jump into our next section, just a few days ago was World Day for Safety and Health at Work. The Uyghur Youth Initiative published this great post to raise awareness for the over 100,000 Uyghurs that work in conditions of forced labor. This is following time in re-education camps. So it's really horrible. It's something that we don't talk about in the West. It gets swept under the rug, and that's not okay. So it's a really important post, and I encourage you to read the whole thing when you have a chance. That was my short. I kept it short today. That was our short updates. If we can lift that content warning, awesome. I'm going to let folks in. We're going to switch over. We kind of change it up to week to week to keep it interesting. We're diving into our education section first because it is going to lead into all of our actions. It's all connected tonight. I really encourage you tonight, take in what you can, but I encourage you to come back to this presentation that is linked in our packet and just take your time and go through it and check out all the resources. There's a lot of great stuff that we have shared here. So there's been a lot of college protests going on. You have probably heard. It was inspired by student protests that began at Columbia University not quite 3 weeks ago. Encampments for Gaza are taking place at colleges across the US and around the world. And despite facing police violence, more demonstrations are popping up everywhere. So if you don't know, or if you want a little refresh, why are these students protesting? Really because they're fed up of not being heard. It's actually now, the number got updated just a few hours ago. More than 35,000 Palestinians have been killed, probably more. UN experts are really concerned because Israel has systematically destroyed all the universities in Gaza. Israel is blocking humanitarian aid. The US continues to provide military funding to Israel. Very germane to college students, many universities profit from investments in Israel, and so much more, right? So there's a lot of reasons that these students and these folks are protesting. So I recommend, if you don't, follow National Students for Justice in Palestine, either on their Instagram or Twitter, and they do a great job of kind of an overview of the actions that are taking place across their chapters. What are they asking for? I feel like this is kind of overlooked a little bit in some of our news. So each encampment situation is going to look really different, but they all follow kind of a general outline of divestment and solidarity. We're going to just look right now at Columbia University's apartheid divestment demands. So first and foremost, divest Columbia's finances, any of the finances that profit from apartheid and genocide, boycott and cut ties with Israeli universities, stop displacement and land grabs by Colombia on Lenape land in the US, Palestine, and beyond. No policing on campus, an end to targeting Palestinian students and allies. End the silence and publicly call for an immediate permanent ceasefire. You can go to that link and see the full version. These were the bullet points. I also really encourage you, we'll have more information on this, but make sure to learn about the specific encampments and demands and needs in your own area, because it is going to be really different college to college. I also wanted to add that, beyond divestment and solidarity, which is a huge piece, this movement is really personal to many students. Al Jazeera interviewed Columbia University's Mexican-Palestinian student, Basil Rodriguez. She is the niece, technically second cousin's daughter, but she is the niece of Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. Akleh was killed by an Israeli soldier while she was reporting on a West Bank raid. Rodriguez says, "I'm here because my aunt gave her life for the cause of sharing truth to the world." For Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, and pro-Palestine students, they've faced a systemic targeting for months with little support, and so this movement has really become deeply personal to many protesters. So where are they protesting? Student protests, what some are calling the student intifada, which that's Arabic meaning to shake off, are rising everywhere. So Students for Gaza, as of like an hour ago, lists 118 encampments and counting in 10 plus countries. There are several more actually that I know of that have begun in the last 48 hours that have not even been updated yet, so it's probably even more by now. Palestine Everywhere is also keeping count of different things, and they've counted 1,812 plus arrests across US campuses. With what's happened today, again, that number is probably higher. The goal is to hold these encampments indefinitely until the students' demands are met. So this is going to mean that it will look different school to school. I wanted to talk really briefly. There is so much I could talk about, but we're going to do the cliff notes here. So why are these student protests important right now? So after 7 months of genocide, it's really taking off. These college protests in particular. So student protests have a history of being powerful. They've been integral to the civil rights movement, to anti-war movements, and so much more. Columbia University specifically has a really important history of student protests. Again, this is the short version. You can read the full version that's linked. But in 1968, 86 Black students began an occupation of Hamilton Hall in protest of the college's new segregated gym. After a week's protest, these students, plus many, many more anti-war protesters, were arrested in one of New York City's largest mass arrests. Ultimately, these protests reshaped Columbia, creating new frameworks for student activism. This makes Columbia's actions in the past week even more heinous and disappointing. They should know their own history better. We'll talk about what Columbia is doing today in a sec. I also linked, I really encourage you to look at it when you get a chance, this pamphlet that has been circulating around at Columbia and other encampments. It's called First We Take Columbia, Lessons from the April 1968 Occupations Movement. My favorite line in this pamphlet is, "This is only the beginning." I am putting a second content warning. The next 3 slides are going to talk about police violence, because that is what has been happening at a lot of encampments. If you'd like to turn your volume down again, that's totally okay, and we'll let you know in the chat. So I wanted to talk about why this is important today, not just in terms of history. So despite a clear record of student protests and their solidarity being on the right side of history, today's encampments have been met with fascist police violence. Beginning with Columbia University, they arrested more than 100 peaceful demonstrators on April 18th. They continue to arrest and suspend students. While Columbia made kind of a show of negotiating with students, within the last couple of days, the administration has given up, only confirming their disingenuousness. You can catch up on Columbia's statement from the administration about this with important commentary from Asma Abu Dahab, a therapist and Columbia alum. These are just a couple updates. I really encourage you to follow the Columbia divestment actions on social media, because I cannot keep up with all of the news that's happening everywhere, but these are just some key points. Early today, literally this like 3 a.m. this morning, Columbia began suspending students who did not disperse from the encampment. In response, this is what they did early this morning. Students occupied Hamilton Hall, the site of the 1968 protests. They have renamed it Hind Hall in honor of Hind Rajab, a 6-year-old girl that was killed by the Israeli genocide. The students write, "Resistance is justified in the movement for liberation. Colombia has forced protesters to escalate by contributing to a genocide while refusing to follow baseline standards of conduct that make negotiation possible. We reiterate that their group encampment is a peaceful form of protest. Do not incite another Kent or Jackson state by bringing soldiers and police officers with weapons onto our campus. Students' blood will be on your hands." Definitely follow them on social media to keep up. I did want to mention while they are getting a lot of media attention, of course, there are so many other protests going on that are facing violence. So another encampment with brutal violence against peaceful protesters is happening at Emory University in Georgia. This is an encampment with super strong ties to Stop Cop City. SWAT teams have used extreme violence, tear gas, rubber bullets. Their assaults included tasing a young volunteer medic who was already handcuffed on the ground. Similarly, at Ohio State and Indiana University, there have been multiple credible reports of snipers set up and pointing at these student encampments. Experts fear for the safety of these students, these kids, and the excessive police and militarized force being deployed against them, despite these encampments being peaceful demonstrations. That is what I'm going to cover for now. Again, I encourage you to follow all of these movements on social media to get the latest. I did past, present. We're going to look at the future a little bit. So the world has definitely entered the find out stage, you know what I mean, with Gen Z college students and their allies. As many support this movement, there will be wonderful history defining progress, and those who support apartheid will double down until their power is extinguished. Already, we're seeing pro-Israel US politicians that are introducing a bill that would create so-called anti-Semitism monitors at colleges that really just add another layer of targeting against pro-Palestine students. So as we're taking down one injustice, it reveals all of the others connected to it. Like we were just looking at, the extreme violence against students in Atlanta, where Cop City is being built, is not a coincidence. We need to work to support these students and fight for Palestine and liberation. And we need to remember that as we're creating this better future, it really is just the beginning. I wanted to put in just a little excerpt from that encampment pamphlet that the Columbia students created. So this is one of their points. They said, "This is only the beginning. A number of revolutionary organizations emerged from the 1968 occupations movement. Pushing the university struggle to its limits might contribute in a similar way to producing a constellation of revolutionary forces in the city today." I thought that was a really beautiful line that I wanted to include. How can we support these protesters? So it is our job to support these students. They're literally kids, right? Young people, they're so young. They shouldn't have to live in a world that requires them to risk their education, resources, and safety to stop genocide, and yet they're giving everything to do so. So we need to do everything in our power to support them and protect them. Bint meets world, that's Arabic for girl. That's a bilingual pun there for you. They put together this wonderful resource on how you can donate, support, volunteer, advocate, educate, and stay safe for encampments. It's an awesome list where there's really something for everybody on that. Again, I mentioned this therapist earlier, but Asma Abu Dahab also put together this mental health tips for student encampers for Palestine that you can check out and boost. I've got another list where I just wanted to kind of lay out a little bit more concretely. You can definitely look at those other resources, but more concretely, how can we help? So if you're able to donate money or supplies, that's amazing. You can join encampments or offer your skills and resources to these groups. You can educate yourself and others about the encampment, their goals, and Palestine. You can connect with local Palestine advocacy groups and organizers in your area, whether they're connected to the college protests or not. You can boost, interact, and share all Palestine and pro-Palestine content on social media. This includes updates from Gaza, not just US-focused protest news. That's really important too, but we want to be boosting all that we can. You can call, email, fax, write the president, your leaders, your representatives, university administration, and their investors, calling for an immediate permanent ceasefire, right? That is always baseline what we want. Divestment from apartheid investments, that's really pertinent to colleges. The protection of student protesters, we should be screaming as loudly as we can that we need to protect these students, and the protection to the right to protest. There's really so much good work to do, and a variety of tactics is to our advantage. So it really, I don't mean this unseriously, I mean this seriously, it's a choose your own adventure. There are so many options, and the more the merrier in terms of what we can do. Most importantly, I put it in bold, we have to keep talking about Palestine. So I did want to include, this was super relevant as I was creating this, how can we protect our right to protest? Because as these encampments continue and as they're supported and work to fight to end apartheid, we will continue to see everyone's rights to protest challenged, and that's not new, sadly. Not only have pro-Palestine supporters' right to protest and boycott been attacked for years, decades, but the US is increasingly taking away our First Amendment rights. So I've got these bullets here that, especially if this is something that interests you or you want to come back to later, there's a collection of legal resources for Palestine activists. There's an article that talks about a federal investigation into anti-Palestinian bias at UMass Amherst, where there is actually an encampment as well now. You can also check out the ACLU's open letter to colleges and universities regarding students' right to protest. There's this great article on how opposition to Palestinian rights has shaped anti-terrorism and protest laws negatively in the US. You can look at the rise of anti-BDS laws and why they should be repealed. That's from a very legal perspective. And you can catch up on, in terms of recent news, you can catch up on how a recent Supreme Court decision threatens the right to protest in 3 US states. So this is all connected and happening, and this slide is like a great little info dump if you want to go into this further. Similarly, another good resource for tips if you're attending a protest. So Know Your Rights, that first link has English, Arabic, and Farsi translations. There's also tips from a creator that I think a lot of us have seen, YK Hong, who says check to ensure that you are working with comrades, that no one is left behind, follow your instincts. That video has a lot of good wisdom. There are student protest safety tips. There's the People's CDC Guide to COVID Safer Protesting, a guide to anti-doxing. I want to point out over here we have a great resource from the US Campaign for Palestinian Rights that includes recordings. So if you're like, I don't want to have to read endless pages, that's fair. Go and watch their video. They've got a whole great video recording on it. We have so many more resources in our main resource compilation. You can scroll to the different sections to find the information you need. I really recommend that. We also added bring extra masks if you can. It really depends on the encampment. Some have been really good about masking for multiple reasons, obviously for identification reasons, for solidarity, for infectious disease reasons, right? However, it varies very much by encampment. So if you're able to bring extra masks, if you go, that's great. And talk to your local mask block. We have a great link that one of the volunteers provided where you can look for one in your area. It's amazing how many are cropping up. And so that way, right, masks are expensive. If you can get some from them and share, that's fantastic. I do have a little note because I know the topic might come up. We are going to have a bunch of resources on debunking the idea that these student protests are anti-Semitic on slide 24. So that's later in the slide that you can refer to. I didn't include that in this section. I did want to share, so this latest and absolutely historic wave of student protests have inspired hope among people across the globe. I really encourage you to catch up on this video from Basan. There's just a little quote I wanted to share. I'm determined to read this without crying, but I thought it was so important to share. So Basan says, I'm 25 years old. I've lived my whole life in the Gaza Strip, and I've never felt hope like now. I've even started to dream that my friends are returning to their cities after being displaced for 75 years. These young heroes in universities around America and the world are stronger than the last occupation in history. For the first time in our lives as Palestinians, we hear a voice louder than their voices and the sound of their bombs, and even stronger than their control in all aspects of our lives. It's a beautiful video. Go watch, boost, share, all the things. I did want to share that. And one more, so rarely do I get to share good news. I wanted to share one more beautiful sentiment that's been going around from Saul on Twitter. And this person writes, for every encampment cleared, 10 more crop up. For every student suspended, 50 more arrive with blankets. For every student professor attacked, 100 peaceful tents are put up. They cannot stop our generation and our hunger for peace and justice. So I thought that was beautiful. I think I am switching to Kevin.
So, hi everybody, I am Kevin. I go by he or they pronouns. And a quick visual description of me is, let's see, I'm white, Ashkenazi, and mixed, most likely, mostly British Isles. I have dark brown hair and stubble and glasses, and I'm calling from Muskogee land. So before we launch into our action section, just a few quick reminders. Please work at the pace that is best for you. All actions are optional. If you wish to use this action section to get more information and then review and act on later, that's awesome. This space is here though, if you wish to take collective action now. So we are going to do a few signal boost, and some of these might be items that you'll want to bookmark and come back to later, either in our extended half hour or on your own later. And then we're going to spend some time identifying and supporting local student protests, both in the US and outside the US. And there are some additional actions as well, which you can do in the bonus time or on your own. We are going to go into signal boost. So the first of these are more traditional signal boost. The last one here is actually really more just providing resources for you for, if you're encountering these claims that the protests are anti-Semitic, we have resources for you. So this is actually the Instagram that Julia shared a little bit ago. We wanted to give you the link, and we also wanted to give you the full transcript. So this full transcript is actually at the very end of the action section in the session packet. The link is here. If you want to go ahead and just signal boost it now, you're welcome to. If you want to click on this link so you have it queued up and then watch it in the bonus time or on your own later, that is also totally fine too. And Julia just commented that saving videos really helps the algorithm. Okay. That is good to know. So this next one is signal boosting. Palestine Legal and the National Lawyers Guild put together an infographic on student protest. So the slide actually just has a few of those excerpts from that carousel. And the web version, sometimes there are issues with Instagram, and I guess like in Canada, there are some issues now with Instagram and the Palestine Legal account. I might not have heard that correctly, but anyhow, the web version is there just, to make things easier. If you feel comfortable going ahead and just, signal boosting it now, you can. There's an upcoming webinar for K through 12 teachers on Palestine. I actually couldn't find the specific information online. I think they are trying to keep that locked down to people who are specifically registered, but it's going to be a panel. And the first panelist, Samia Shulman, is somebody who's put together a really, really helpful framework for how to teach about Palestine. She is Palestinian American. She is in California. She has experienced some pushback talking about Palestine, and the framework she's developed, she's found is really helpful for, still being able to talk about Palestine. In a nutshell, it basically shows that people can come to consensus on some facts and, still understand that they have different perspectives on the situation, and then use that as a place to start moving forward. So I think what she'll have to say is going to be really, really helpful. So again, the information on when the webinar is, I think that's only available to people who register, but I think the information will be really helpful. So if you know K through 12 teachers that might be interested, please let them know about those. The link is in the chat. And also just, if you're interested in, kind of those difficult conversations that have to happen, when doing activism, this might also be a webinar that you might not be able to glean some information from as well. So yeah, we definitely don't expect you to read all this information now, but we know that there are some criticisms that student protests are anti-Semitic. The thing is that I think it's really always helpful to remind people anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are not zero-sum games. So if someone is concerned about anti-Semitism and they also care about discrimination and human rights in general, and they're not just using claims of anti-Semitism to block critique of genocide and apartheid, then they will condemn Islamophobia and the attacks on Gaza along with anti-Semitism. They're not zero-sum games. Um, so some references that might be helpful are available on this slide. And let's see, I'll just do a few notes on some of them. So the campus protests make me uncomfortable and they fill me with hope. If you pull this up, you might see a different title. It's pulled up with different titles for me, but it's the same text. This is Peter Beinart. So Beinart often centers Jews, and it can be unnerving because Israel is killing Palestinians right now. And it's also something that may make him accessible to liberal Zionists. I mean, honestly, when I first read Beinart stuff, I would have classified him as a soft Zionist. I don't think he actually would classify himself that way. I think he identifies as anti-Zionist. But you know, just if you have like your Zionist Uncle Frank, who's a liberal Zionist, Beinart might be someone who is more accessible to him. And see, unpacking the campus anti-Semitism narrative. This is actually a really pretty nuanced discussion. They also reflect on organizing strategies, and they reflect on some themes that are pertinent to transformational justice as well. So I know a number of folks are pretty interested in transformational justice. So if you listen to this podcast with a transformational justice frame in mind, you may appreciate what they say also, you know, from kind of more transformational justice perspective. So yeah, please review or save these resources that might be helpful for you or your folks on your